Welcome our patrons who are with us here on Zoom, and we welcome our viewers on YouTube. Today we have a very special guest, Adam Brown. He will also speak at the London conference of the International Association of Jewish Genealogical Societies. And the subject of today is DNA. And Adam, of course, has done a lot of work to change the way we do genealogy. Of course, there's still documentary evidence, but DNA is proving to be a tool that's more and more productive. And Adam has been instrumental in this. So we'll talk about his interest in genetic genealogy, recent developments, and how he thinks the field will develop. Thank you, Adam, for speaking with us. And let's start. David?
I suppose the first question is, could you just give a brief introduction to who you are and how you became interested, presumably first in genealogy and then in sort of genetic genealogy?
Sure. So thank you very much, David and Tan, for asking me to come on this morning. I want to correct one misstatement, which is that I'm the driving force in the Avotaynu DNA Project. In fact, I have a tiger by the tail, and of very avid, intelligent collaborators who are driving this project. I'm just sort of the person who's the caboose. Some of them are on today. Dr. Mirna Gabai, who is one of our leading the charge in the Iraqi community, and Michael Wass is on today. He is an historian anthropologist who I know most of you folks know from past talks he's given here in IAJGS, et cetera. But Michael is an expert in the Mediterranean Jewish world. Among other parts of the Jewish world, he's very knowledgeable about the Jews of Iberia and the Ottoman Empire, among other locations, and I depend upon him greatly. I see Jacob Rosen is on. Jacob is an expert in surnames of the Mizrahi world, from Cairo to Baghdad, publishing.
Oh dear. Hopefully it will come back. He froze. Whilst he's unfreezing,
surname list.
So Adam, you froze, but you're back.
Okay, I'm sorry, folks. I'm on the island of Martha's Vineyard, and we have terrible internet access here. I think it's all the hedge fund people trading that takes up all the bandwidth.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make this point that this is a group, and we have a.
No.
We are not doing terribly well. Whilst Adam unfreezes, just to say, for those people who are coming to London, if you're not in
some people here.
We'll let him. I'm sorry, Adam, you froze yet again.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm in a terrible spot on the island. There are people, and there are other people on this call who've been very helpful, and we've tested. Anna DePass helped us make a very important connection in Jamaica, and Maya Bellum I see on the call from Sweden, and we have high hopes in working with you, Maya, because we're finding Sephardi men who converted to Christianity in the 18th century in Sweden, who we want to work on with you. Okay, so we have to be in touch with each other. I got involved in genealogy because I was the youngest of many cousins, and I knew my grandparents as a small boy, and I used to quiz them. And when I was about 30, my mother sold our house, and she said, "There's a drawer here you want." And in that drawer was all my notes of all my conversations at the age of 6 and 7 with my grandparents describing their families. And as the keeper of that, I started from there, ended up with a tree with about 80,000 people on it. And during that time, I got to know Bennett Greenspan and began testing all my distant cousins. And I then tested all the fathers at my son's day school in New Jersey. And I found that the distribution of Y chromosomes was identical for my cousins as it was for the fathers at the day school. And then I read a study by Doron Bahar. This is in around.
Perhaps could people watching turn off their video? I don't know if that would help, or if it's just because of Adam's connection only.
2004. Okay.
Sorry,
Am I any better?
You're back.
Okay. So I'll try to make this as short as I'll keep it short snips. So basically, I got involved as the keeper of the family history, and I then delved into genetics, and I saw something, a pattern, but it really wasn't anything I could work with until Big Y next generation sequencing came out 6 years ago. And I think we've talked about that at length. I don't have to dwell on that now. And that led me to a conversation with Karl Skoretsky of the Technion, which led me to a conversation with Michael Wass and a conversation with Raquel Levy-Toledano and Ton. And I got to know David. And most of all, I got to know Wim Penix. Wim Penix is sort of the Mother Teresa of this entire movement, right? He's the guy, he's the good guy in everything who tolerates all opinions, right and wrong, but he holds fast to truth. And so I would say the one characteristic of our project is we have only tolerated people who have a commitment to the truth. And the second characteristic of being in our project is you're okay with a good argument among us, okay? That you're respectful of one another, and that you're respectful to people in the genealogical world. Okay, there aren't that many people who are interested in what we're interested in to start ticking them off. Okay, you really have to get along with everybody because there aren't many of us, and we are unique in that we're interested in one thing. Okay, the group you're on today, we're all interested in Sephardic genealogy, but it's not like there's millions of us out there. Okay, we really have to sort of get along and work together. So that's how I got involved in this, and I'm a big picture kind of guy, and I knew my family pretty well, but what was the context of the Jewish people? You know, what is the architecture of our peoplehood, and where do we come from? So that has been really the overarching goal of my personal goal. And I've been fortunate enough to hook up with a lot of people who I described earlier who feel the same way. So
can you something I'm never quite sure of is the relationship between Avotaynu and the Avotaynu DNA Project, because I knew Avotaynu originally as being a magazine and now more of a website. Are they one and the same, and yeah?
That's a good question. Avotaynu Inc. was a for-profit enterprise that published a journal and published books, you know, particularly those by Sasha Bader on surnames, both Ashkenazi and Sephardi. And we are completely separate, although we have an affinity for one another. And Sally Ann is a very old friend of mine and neighbor up here in Martha's Vineyard. And Gary, I've known many, many years. And I thought they had a wonderful reputation, and I thought they'd be fun to do something with. And so they supported us in terms of promoting our project in the pages of Avotaynu, which was very important, and opening doors for us. But we are, unlike Avotaynu Inc., which is no longer functioning, we are a nonprofit organization managed by a separate entity called Avotaynu Foundation. Yes. And we have no connection with Avotaynu at all, other than mutual admiration and support.
And with your sort of DNA project, because obviously we're coming in from the Sephardic side, so that's more or less all we talk about. Could you sort of break it down between sort of Sephardic and Ashkenazi and Mizrahi and Mountain Jews and everyone else? Okay,
so what we began to do is the project, the germ of the project was a conversation between Karl Skoretsky and myself in 2016, when we were wondering what we might find in terms of the exiles of the from the Alhambra decree in 1492, and actually a century earlier, the riots in 1391. Where would we find descendants of those individuals who left Iberia during that period and subsequent generations, out of Portugal? And that was the beginning of the study. And as we began that study, we started to expand it because we found connections between the different populations, between the Jews of Portugal, who were clearly from Portugal, such as the Jews of the Caribbean. So I think the first person we tested with was Sandy de Marchena of Curacao, and Sandy roped up 20 of her boys she grew up with over Hanukkah one year, and that was our first Caribbean data set. And then we went to in 2016 we went to Seattle, and Chazan Ike Azos of the Rhodesleyan synagogue out there got us 75 men from the Ottoman Empire, Rhodes in particular. And we began to find cross connections. And we realized then we really had our blinders on if we just were focusing on the known Sephardi descendants. You really had to look at all of them. And one by one, as opportunities arose, we began to test further afield. We worked a little bit with Ainsley in Jamaica. And of course, we came on here, starting during the COVID. And we found all sorts of folks on this on your program who became participants in the study. And at the same time, we began to reach out to other communities. So we began to test in Yemen. Raquel Levy Toldano joined our project as administrator, and we tested 150 men, or she was able to arrange for us to test 150 men in Morocco. Subsequently, as I mentioned, Dr. Gabai tested 100, together with our own cohort, we have together 150 men from Iraq who are profoundly interested in their genealogy. And we have been just working our way around the Horn. Right now, we're working on the Yemeni community in Israel. So we have about 75 already, and we're looking to get another 100 from Yemen in the next, over the summer. So one by one, we've been working opportunistically, and really to say we don't really regard them as a separate study anymore. We regard them. This is a global study of all Jewish populations around the world. The most recent group we had is a group of 100 men from Kochi, India. These are the Black Jews, not the Jews who came out of Iraq, around the time of David Sassoon, not that period, but many hundreds years earlier. And we're probably almost, I would say probably almost 1,000 years earlier than the arrival of the Iraqi Jews. So we have 100 of those. We big Y tested all of them, and we found very interesting connections to the medieval community in Iraq, and we've also found interesting connections to Kurdistan and Georgia and Persia, and of course a very strong introduction of genes from the from the Hindu. This is something we're going to talk.
Well, just wait until.
Talk about, we're going to do.
Yeah,
Am I back?
do you want to try turning off your video? I mean, it's a shame not to see you, but maybe that would improve the bandwidth.
That's not. Okay, let's give that a try.
Yeah.
All right. I'm not that pretty to look at anyway, so don't.
Don't do yourself down. Can we ask? Did you have any expectations of what you would find when you started this project? That's to say, did you think we'll all, go back to an address in Jerusalem or something?
All right. So the point, the inquiry-based study, we really had no expectations of what we would find. But we did find some things, very early on, which I think set the stage for the entire project. And again, it was all because of the availability of the Big Y testing. The big, and your next question is going to be, what did you find? Okay, in your earliest things. The most important thing we finding we had was embodied in an article that Michael Wass wrote about a very specific Y chromosome that his family descends from, called JZ640, which is a chromosome that is found all over the world, or at least from the Mediterranean and Europe and South America. And he found that there was the JZ640 was a man, or the person who carried that mutation was a man who lived in the Middle East during the late Bronze Age or the Bronze Age, and that he had numerous descendant branches in the 3,000 to 4,000 years since he lived, and that these branches were found in many different populations. Armenia, Saudi Arabia, found in South America, found among Sephardim, found among Ashkenazim. And basically what his discovery was that the Jews, at least of that lineage, descended from a specific Bronze Age lineage that was endemic in the Middle East. Okay? And that JZ640, notwithstanding that it was found in Sephardi and Ashkenazi communities, was found in many other communities in the Middle East, and that the Jewish people, at least at the JZ640 was concerned, were of and from the Levant, and the overall Middle Eastern community, which was a very important discovery for us, and tied into the fact that following the late Bronze Age, it was a demographic catastrophe for the Middle East, because we see no new branching, we see no new population surges for a couple of thousand years after what's called the late Bronze Age collapse around 1200 BC that Michael and I both talked about considerably. And that would be a very long talk in itself if I repeated it here, but I've given this talk to you that there was a world in which the Middle East was ruled by four empires who kept a lid on the Middle East and suppressed national aspirations for purposes of keeping the supply lines open for tin, which was
Okay, maybe that idea didn't work.
was found far afield of the Middle East, and it was an essential component.
Adam, I'm afraid you
Okay, I'm back now.
broke
Right?
up. Can you call back on your cell phone? Would that help?
Yeah, I'll do that. And I'm going to keep my answers short. How does that sound?
No, okay, long. It's just we'd like to hear them.
Okay, give me a second.
Okay. Whilst that's being done, just to say, obviously we're hoping to see everyone who's coming to London. If you are in London or in the UK, we are provisionally meeting at the conference hotel after Ton's talk on Monday, which I think ends at 5 something. Sorry, Adam is just coming in again. We've set up a WhatsApp group, so if you're not on it, we'll see if we can share in the chat here if you're coming to London. Also, please be aware that there's lots of strikes going on, so which is actually quite unusual here. So check for strikes at airports. I think there's going to be strikes at Gatwick Airport, and also check for trains. And if anyone has any problems, I can try and help. Adam, you're muted.
Okay, how am I now?
Much better, hopefully. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Okay, so where was I? Oh, talking about the Bronze.
You were in the middle of the Bronze Age collapse. Okay, this brilliant idea doesn't work either. Okay, sorry. Perhaps it wasn't the best idea to ask you to use the phone.
No. Can you see me now?
We can see you. You're just freezing again.
All right.
But we can hear you now.
All right. When I freeze, one of you guys raise your hand, okay, and then I'll know.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So the point I wanted to make simply was we are all of the Middle Eastern Bronze Age period for the most part, and Our discovery was that we have about 700 different Y chromosomes found among the Jewish population worldwide, and that and because of 3,000 years of cousin marriage, we're probably all descended from almost all of these 700 men. Okay, they became Jewish at different times. In history and different. Okay, I did it again, right?
Well, you didn't. The telephone company did.
And does it again.
David, what is the telephone number he can call in on?
Is there one?
Yes, Zoom gives you a telephone number.
Okay,
that he
I
can
will
call in
check
on.
that because I'm that.
So Adam, if you call in on this number that he'll give you, the audio will be by the phone company, not by the Zoom company.
Okay, let me see if I can find it.
I apologize, you guys. I'm in the middle of nowhere, so
I thought you said you're in Martha's Vineyard.
that's the middle of nowhere.
All right, okay.
It's the center of the world.
It's the center of political fundraising at this time.
I'm gonna get in my car and I'm gonna drive to a better location while we're talking.
Okay, well, don't drive and talk, please. That would be tragic.
That's a nice experiment.
Okay, I'm afraid I can't actually.
It's, on Zoom.
No, I've logged into Zoom. I can't see the. Oh, here we go. Where's it? Oh, here we go. One tap mobile. I guess that's it. Dial in by your location. Okay. Adam, if you're here, I'm putting a dial-in phone number.
Okay.
If that helps. I think it's the first time we've actually had somebody, a speaker, sort of climb into their car and flee, but
Apropos of the Sephardic experience.
indeed.
Well, if it was Sephardi, I would have left by boat.
Oh, I'm afraid in my family it would be left by somebody else's boat, but so whilst we're doing that, let me just do housekeeping and find the Tom, do you just want to check any comments, and I will look to see if we have.
Pete Glass mentions that the main tube strikes are called off. Maybe
we have a union here called the RMT that gets paid like ridiculous sums of money for no work, but they drive the trains, so they have everyone by the hostage.
Don't say that. That's not right. They
Well,
come here, comrade.
they're actually my near neighbors where I am. But no, I had a friend who worked there, and he worked like 3 days a week and got paid. This is like years ago. Got paid 60,000 quid.
I don't think it's exactly the same, but whatever it is, we need them.
So let me know when you're seeing me reliably.
like now.
All right, I'm driving into civilization.
Where's civilization?
Civilization is the center of town.
Okay.
So I'm coming in from the countryside.
Okay, you don't have to drive all the way to Boston or something.
And no. And the funny part would be if I got pulled over for using my cell phone. Okay?
Oh yeah, but be careful, please.
That would be the Jesus resistance. Okay, so I'm coming in.
I
So I think
hope you're not near Chappaquiddick.
Oh, good.
I'm looking out on Chappaquiddick, but it's broad daylight and I won't miss that bridge.
Okay.
So, and I'm not drunk.
And if you need any shrinks, they're all in Wellfleet.
Say that again.
You need any psychiatric care, all the New York psychiatrists are in Wellfleet now.
Okay, I'll have to fly across to see them. All right, so if you can see me now, I'm going to pull over. If you can hear me, okay.
We can, yes.
All right, so we were discussing the late Bronze Age, and we'll get off that topic quickly because I know you have more you want to ask. But the basic point we've discovered is that the defining moment in our history genetically was the late Bronze Age, when we diverged from our cousins, if you will, in the Middle East and began to develop Israelite identity. It is a classic genetic finding among the 700 lineages that we have no branching into non-Jewish communities between the late Bronze Age and about 300 AD.
Well,
We see nothing. We see no.
Of those you've tested, though, what percentage belong to those lineages? Because, for example, I think mine just sort of turned up in Iberia.
Well, that I'm gonna make. So remember, I said about 300 AD.
Yeah.
So when the Iberian lineages, which we've identified, and there's several dozen, clearly appear to have become part of the Jewish community during the Roman era. And Michael Wass delivered a paper on this in Portugal a couple of summers ago. One particular lineage, RDF27, which is about 4,500 years old, which is clearly Iberian in origin. And we have found that in the Jewish community. We found it in one Ashkenazi lineage and a couple of dozen of Sephardi lineages. So there was some degree of non-Jewish Y chromosomes finding their way into the Jewish community during the Roman era. And mine is an outlier. It's not a DF27 lineage, but it's clearly a non-Jewish Iberian lineage. Actually came out of England and migrated to Iberia during the Roman era and then joined the Jewish community there. So we do have a degree of lineages that joined the Jewish community along the way. But what's very interesting is we, except for those outliers where we have clear signals of lineage joining the Jewish population in Roman times, we see almost no diversity with non-Jewish or sharing of non-Jewish ancestry prior to Roman times and the great majority of our lineages. We see nothing until, in some cases, until the present day. Now, this brings up an interesting point. What are the exceptions to that? The broad exception to that are the Ashkenazim. Because in the Ashkenazim, we can clearly see a branching event going on 700-800 AD. There was some kind of population increase, explosion that occurred in early Ashkenazi times. And we see a second explosion in Poland, Lithuania in the 14th, 15th century, which also indicates an Ashkenazi population. One thing we found in our study is that it was surprising, was that we have a large number of Ashkenazi lineages which appear to be Ottoman in origin. And we say that because we see the expansion in 1400, but we have no evidence of any expansion in 800 AD. And in fact, some of these Ashkenazi branches show no expansion in either 800 or 1400 or 1500. So we expect those are lineages that came up with the Ottomans. And we have plenty of documentary evidence that there was Ottoman settlement in places like where.
Oh dear, I'm so sorry, everyone. I think we've lost our speaker. Maybe he was too close to Chappaquiddick. We shall see. Ton, I don't know if you want to do some sort of interpretive dance or something whilst we're waiting for Adam to return.
We had that in our first year, this guy twirling. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something's going on in this island today. It's got nothing to do with us. You know, we have cable to the mainland, and sometimes we have problems.
Oh, it's probably the
So,
Russians.
anybody hear me?
Since 2
Yeah.
minutes, your connection was bad. And
Okay.
then-
So, I think I was bringing up the point that we see it. How about now? David, give me a high sign if you see me, hear me.
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I guess the point I wanted is the thing that was surprised us is we were able to clearly see the migration of Ottoman Jews up into Southeastern Europe, to Slovakia, Hungary, Galicia, Romania, Moldova. And we see them today because they show no evidence of having participated in the big population explosions that affected the Ashkenazi community in early centuries. So these are, you know, we have a lot of surprises. We've seen, we have clear evidence of the of four Kohen lineages that go back far back in time. One 2,900 years, another 2,600 years, another one 2,500 years, another one 1,700 years. So
Hmm.
Welcome to live television, everyone.
You think there are any dead Kennedys whose connection he
Bernard, this is what our ancestors went through when they waited for mail.
exactly?
The most modern of problems.
I'm afraid I can't think of anything profoundly intelligent to say to fill the.
I was asking myself if this means that all these maps where you see Jews moving from the Rhineland after they were moved out there by the Germans going to Poland, if that is incorrect.
no, it's correct. It's just that the population, the Ashkenazi population came from different directions, Tom.
Mhm.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can. Yes.
Hello?
Hi. We can hear
Okay.
you. Yeah.
So the Jewish population, there's no question Jews came from the Rhineland East. I don't think there's any question that they came up the.
Oops.
This, ladies and gentlemen, is why you need to come to an in-person conference.
Speaking of which, do you want a preview?
Well, we're just doing this to make them look good. So.
Yeah, this is a real clever way to get us to the conference. A teaser.
But yeah, we're sort of floating the idea whilst we're hopefully Adam can reconnect, that at some point maybe to have a sort of Sephardic meetup somewhere, maybe in I mean not a grand conference, but maybe we can just all go to a hotel in Morocco or some such.
Bars.
Oh, so near and yet so far.
Yeah. Adam, you should
Can you hear me now?
Market.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Okay,
Yeah.
I've turned off the video. Maybe that'll
Yeah.
help. All right, so I have basically, I have 5 bars, so I don't know what the problem is, but and if you lose me completely, bring Michael Wass on and you can ask him, he'll have the same answers I'll have, so.
Oh, that's good idea.
Shucks.
Mhm.
So that, I think that's the long and short of it. The idea is the Jews came from all different directions. That's what the DNA is showing us.
Is it time to draw a new map?
Yes. Yes. And I think the map needs to be geo, what's the word you used for it? It needs to be linked in time and space. That's the fundamental problem with the map that we have is they're not keyed into time. They make it look like everything happened at once. And the migration of Jews out of Germany didn't happen at once. It happened over centuries from Germany to Poland. So this is the failing of this whole system. Is it's not time dynamic. It's very static.
I once saw a video about slave ships through time, and you could see the slave routes along which slaves were transported by sea from Africa to countries, and then you can see the changes over time, first to Brazil, then to the Caribbean, then to the United States. I think it should be possible to produce such maps for Jewish migrations.
Yeah, I
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, that would be an excellent application for AI if you want to get into that conversation. But that is precisely the kind of application that we could develop using artificial intelligence.
Mhm.
I will tell you the factor that we're going to, and we're thinking about it for our purposes, but the major factor is we need to provide for the sanctity of our data. So we can't really use ChatGPT or any of those folks. We're going to need to, at some point, invest in a standalone machine learning system that can use our data sequestered from anyone else's data, because our data is so private, and we're obligated to sustain that privacy. So I think that's definitely the future. If you want to know what the future of genealogy is, I think it's going to be the ability to mine data and draw conclusions based on that data in a standalone, protected environment.
Yeah, I've
And that
started
technology
playing with,
exists. It's just expensive at this stage.
Yeah, I've started playing with geographical information systems, of which ArcGIS seems to be the most widely used. But when you come to London, we can talk in depth. We are talking to other people that can help, and I'm sure there's stuff we can do together. Oh, indeed.
Now, another
Bruce has just shared ArcGIS. Yeah.
One of the other interesting things we have to add to the map, Ton, is the Silk Road. We see clear evidence of Jewish migration along the Silk Road in the turn of the second millenniums AD, and we think that's something we have to explore further based on the new data we're getting from Iraq and from Bukhara and from China. So we think there's a lot of possibilities for that. The real next phase of our project is, now that I think we're pretty comfortable with the 700 lineages, that we're going to start doing big wide testing of those lineages to be able to carve out specific genetic mutations in each of those lineages that we can use to define the founding of the Jewish population in each case. That's our next goal.
How easy is it to be also doing mitochondrial DNA? Obviously, I understand that it sort of mutates at a much slower rate, but obviously, sort of Jewishly, the sort of matrilineal line is the one that matters.
Well, it doesn't appear to us that's always been the case. There's plenty of evidence, particularly in the Ashkenazi community, that there is a divergence between the origins of the men and the women to some extent.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get too deeply into it because I haven't really studied the mitochondrial DNA myself. But at first blush, okay, it would appear that the men are more Mediterranean in origin than women. Again, that's only at first blush, and I'm not saying that as gospel because I haven't proven it. But that seems to be the opinion of people like Bahar and others who've studied the autosomal DNA. I'd be interested to see some population studies of the Ashkenazim based on whole genome sequencing.
Yeah.
Which is a much more careful way to go about it because you're looking at 3 billion locations instead of 250,000, which is the case in autosomal DNA. There's a talk, by the way, that I think is the talk that I'm looking forward to when I go to London, in addition to those by you, David, and Ton, and Michael, and Raquel. I want to see the talk about the Jews thrown down the well in Norwich.
Yes.
In 1190, because there's a fellow who did that study who's going to talk about the genetic diseases they found in that population. We already know they were Jewish, without doubt, because we know the mitochondrial DNA and we know the Y chromosomes of the individuals who they studied. But I'm very interested to hear more about the whole genome sequencing they did and what kinds of diseases they carried. Because if we can identify those diseases as being part of the Ashkenazi population in 1190, that tells us a great deal about the origins of that population. So that's something that I'm looking forward to in London.
This is not strictly a Sephardic question, but might it be possible to just using software to work out earlier generations autosomal DNA? That's to say, at the moment, I think it's 5 to 6 generations. Might it be possible just by a logical sequencing of what we have to push it back further?
Adam?
I'm sorry, David, I lost you.
I was asking. Well, I actually forget my question because I'm sure Bruce has something more intelligent to say. Bruce, you want to speak? You're muted.
Yeah. Well, I hope I live up to the advertising. But hey, is it possible? How does the genetic disease research help with the Sephardic research? I mean, what are the databases of genetic disease as someone who has an Ashkenazi Jewish neurological disease, I'm told? What would be the complementarity, if you will, of looking at those databases alongside your own, the ones that you've traced in Avotaynu? I don't
like we lost Adam.
Yeah, I don't know if Adam heard.
Maybe Michael last.
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm back. Please,
Adam.
Michael.
Michael, can you unmute yourself?
I can answer that. We don't look at any medical at all. That's outside the scope of our study, though. We do work with researchers that are researching genetic mutations leading into disease by descent. So none of our data contains any medical information.
I guess, Michael, I'm asking whether the complementarity in the databases would reveal something or might be worth exploring. What's your hunch?
Honestly, I don't think so, because it's two completely different tracks, even though the information can complement each other in a as seeing the research on 2 tracks, but I do not see a situation where genetic disease is necessarily going to play any real role, at least in this understanding of population. I
Well-
even have my own doubts about whether or not we can truly say something is unless we have concrete data. But a good example would be a lot of people popularly claim that the appearance of familial Mediterranean fever in the Jewish community obviously means that your Ashkenazi ancestor was secretly Sephardic, which is nonsense because the FMF exists in the Mediterranean population for a whole lot longer, and we all descend from a common soup bowl from 4,000 years ago, which is why it shows up in every community on the Mediterranean.
Well, I think you can hear me now.
Yes.
I think what we're finding about Jewish genetic diseases is that they are rarely Jewish genetic diseases. They're diseases that enter the Jewish population through integration into local communities. And what happens is that Judaism, because of the Jewish community, because of their fondness for endogamy, have amplified these diseases to such an extent that they've been preserved in our community and lost elsewhere. But we were never a big enough community to start having these genetic diseases all on our own. I don't think these populations of the Raman Yod and some of those others may never have been more than 10 or 20,000 people.
Yeah.
So the Jewish community was much, much smaller than anybody ever gave it credit for. We believe that the population of the Jews of Iberia was much smaller, that the number of people who emigrated following the Alhambra decree was much less than suggested. The sizes of the different Portuguese lineages we're finding around the world are actually much smaller than I expected to find. So it's in my gut that historians have vastly overestimated the sizes of Jewish events throughout our history, and I would say that the only thing we might find, Michael, from genetic diseases is some indication of the same kinds of population increases that we saw in the Y chromosome. Because variations don't just happen on the Y; they also happen in all over the genome as a function of population expansion. The more births there are, the more mutations you're going to see, and we might be able to find some branching, Michael, in the vicinity of these coding genes, like we see them everywhere else. So, but I agree with Michael. I don't think the existence of one disease or another necessarily suggests whether one is part of one population or another. I mean, there are some examples of relatively recent diseases which seem to be specific to different Jewish populations. And I think the point I want to make there is when we say diseases, a disease like Tay-Sachs, there are different flavors of Tay-Sachs. There are different mutations that occur to the same disease. So what you have to focus on is the mutation, not on the disease. So there are diseases. We just did a study of one called RDEB, which is a disease of the gene that codes for collagen. And if you go online, if you go to our website, I think we have a reference to that article published in collaboration with the University of Colorado, in which we found a disease among purported Jewish populations in New Mexico and Colorado. But what's interesting is that we found this terrible disease among these Jewish populations, but they have different flavors of the disease. The disease is common in Iberia, but they have different flavors, meaning each one of them has a different history of that disease. What makes the Jewish community unique, and the reason why it's so prevalent in the Jewish community, is because of the endogamy. So that's really what diseases are about. Diseases are about what caused this endogamy. And it just so happens that the Jewish prevalence for endogamy led to these various diseases and creates some degree of identity between the Jewish community and these diseases. So that's really all I have to say about that. It's the endogamy that's the feature that makes it a Jewish disease.
Well, thank you.
I have a question about surnames. A lot of Jewish families must have branched out before 1492 or before the Alhambra degree. And they must have ended up in different places and got their Spanish or Portuguese surnames after 1492. Do you find many examples of families with the same Y DNA but different surnames? Maybe Michael can answer that one.
We have plenty of evidence of families with different surnames, but with the Sephardic community, unless they are specifically descending from the Portuguese Jews, typically the surnames are quite old, and we're talking 1,000 years of history at least, with the surnames between two unrelated individuals. We have plenty of examples of that from Morocco all the way to India.
Thank you. Bernard has his hand up.
It was actually partly in relation to the Jewish genetic diseases thing. I received from the Jewish Genealogy SIG Facebook group from Arthur Sisman this morning an article about recent research on Jewish genetic diseases. And what was interesting is it's primarily about Ashkenazi diseases, but it has analyzed clusters of what it says, and I haven't read it. I don't know what the basis for it is, but what it says are Greek Sephardic and Turkish Sephardic groups, but not anything further west. I'd be interested if when Adam and or Michael have had a chance to look at it, if they think there's anything of interest in there.
2 questions. What's the date of the article?
Just a sec.
July
July
20.
the 20th, 2023, which sounds pretty much
Yesterday.
like this week.
And who's the author?
Sorry, I don't see anything. It seems to be from 23andMe, and it does not credit anybody.
Okay.
It
the article
says the plots are by someone called Emir Kenny. They're talking about plots of clusters of various diseases.
According to a note that was just published, Bernard, on just in the chat, this is based on an article written in 2012.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I only got it this morning, and it was dated 3 days ago, so I don't know.
And so I'd have to take a look at. I'd like to see the results in a next generation sequencing on a panel. I don't know whether this was something that was done genetically or whether it was done as sort of a population study. So we'll take a look at that.
Okay. And
but it's not an article that's taken the world by fire, Bernard.
No, I kind of guessed that, but then I thought it was just 3 days old. So if it's from 2012 and still hasn't had any impact, then fair enough. The other thing is that if I actually make it to the conference, I'm going to be giving 2 talks, one on which I called Sephardic Scandinois, which is about my Sephardic relatives that made it to Scandinavia. And one of them, at least I will name because he's dead, so I can name him here and I don't worry about it. And that was Stig Ramel, who was, I think, head of the Nobel Foundation for many years. But our most recent common ancestor that I've been able to track is a 10th great-grandfather to both of us in 1640s Venice. Oh God, I've forgotten his first name. The surname was Baruch anyway. And in the other one, I'm going to be talking about Sephardic governors general and viceroys of Portuguese India, with a question mark. But one of the people that I will be mentioning, and I won't name him here because he's alive, is a descendant, 15th great grandson of a Goan grandfather, but he claims to have traced the family back another couple of generations to the Algarve in Portugal, and mentions having had Y DNA testing. So you may already have him, but if you don't, I'm happy to share his name with you, Adam, so that you can.
Yeah, please connect me, Bernard, and we'll communicate with him.
Well, I should see you there if I get there.
Okay. Well, we have an Avotaynu table in the exhibitors hall.
Okay.
And you're welcome to come and chat.
Thank you.
On the subject of the conference, I think they've still got lots of Sephardic talks at the same time. So I think they've scheduled Michael, Steve, and Serena Roffey, if I'm not wrong, to speak all at the same time. Ton and I are going to be talking tomorrow with the president of the IAJGS, and maybe possible at this late stage to sort of move some of the talks around so that we can all get to hear the ones we want. But thank you. Sarah, have we missed any more questions in the chat, or if anyone has any questions?
I don't think so.
My apologies for the terrible communications from up here. The fact that it's gotten good all of a sudden tells me that we just had a system interruption, which happens.
Okay, so I'm just looking at
having downtime.
We have one cable that comes here from the mainland, and when it goes, it goes.
So on YouTube, Alain, hi, we're looking forward to seeing you in a few days. Anita says, you tested my son and husband. The male line originally came from Aden, now Yemen.
We're interested in those.
Okay. I'm not sure if Anita's going to be at the conference, but hopefully she can come and
anyone with Yemen connections or other Sephardic connections that you think might be interested in testing, please contact me.
There is an Aden, well, Anita's probably the person to advise on that. There is an Adeni community in London, but they're all sort of turned black-hatted Hasidic, so I don't know how keen they might be, but I think Anita can probably advise on that.
Okay.
Can I ask you, Adam, are you in touch with Ophira Gamliel of Glasgow University, who's doing a lot of work on basically pre-colonial Indian Jews? And she may have useful connections. She works closely with quite a lot of the emigre community from Goa in Israel, from the Malayalam speaking community. So she might be someone worth talking to. I don't know whether or not she'd be coming to the conference. I've got a feeling she's not particularly interested in genealogy. She's interested in culture and language.
I'd be very interested in talking to her. I mean, the community we've tested, the Kochi community, are Malayalam speaking group. So, but we know that there's more than one of them, along the Malabar coast. So yeah. I'd be very interested. Very interested in the Goa community. The Kochi community is quite clearly not Portuguese in their origins. We're seeing no connections at all.
Which is what I'll be saying in my talk.
Yeah, they're quite distinct. So I'm looking forward to that.
Great. You said before that the Jewish, you thought the Jewish population in both Iberia and elsewhere was smaller than historians have estimated. How can you work that out? Because you're working with sort of incomplete data sets.
But we have a pretty good, Michael is the expert on this, but we have a pretty good data set on the Portuguese Jews because they paid a tax when they entered into Portugal. Michael, would you like to comment on this? Because you have thoughts on this.
And I'll be giving the broad strokes of it in London in my talk, but the Sessão tax in 1495, which taxed all the heads of Portuguese, of Jews in the country, as well as all the heads of family. And it had about 28,000 heads of Jewish families on the eve of the forced conversion, which we can say maybe is anywhere between 50 to 80,000 people, assuming that, not every head of family has a family or children, or, they might be elderly, they might be young. And we know historically that the plurality of Jews in 1492 went across the border to Portugal or directly into North Africa. So honestly, on the Alhambra decree, I would be surprised if the population of Iberian Jewry was anywhere north of 100,000, maybe 120,000 people. And the genetic data again bears this out, that we don't have, if it was 300,000 people, like some historians claim, you'd expect that we would just through sheer luck have a lot more evidence of massive lineages, and we don't. We simply don't. There's a few outstanding lineages, otherwise they are maybe one family, two families that share a common ancestor 800 years ago.
Could you tell me something about my lineage, please? Abulafia Halevi. Is there any point in testing me?
Well, we've tested the Abulafia family, and I'd be happy to send you an email with the results about that. That's the Abulafia family from Gallipoli and Hebron.
Well, mine came out of Egypt in about 1922.
Okay, so they came from Turkey. They probably came from the Abulafia family of Gallipoli.
Probably, don't know quite.
Yeah, which was a rabbinic lineage.
Yes.
And they did settle. I think they did settle in Hebron at some point in time. And of course, there's the wonderful Abulafia Muslim family of Jaffa.
Really?
The bakers, right, Michael? And
they're actually not Abulafia. They work.
No,
for
I know the story.
Family.
Well, I know there's a family story that the Rabbi Abulafia took in a Muslim orphan, and that when the boy grew up, he adopted the family name. And but if you go and talk to an Abulafia family in Jaffa, they know the whole story. They know they're not Jewish, but they honored their ancestor.
Yeah.
Yes. Russell is quite right. They did also settled in Izmir, the Abulafia family.
They're also Tiberias.
Yes. But we have definitely tested that family, and we have found other connections to that family. But I'll talk to you about that. I'll send you a letter. Just remind me.
Have you got my contact?
I'm sorry.
Have you got a contact with me?
Well, David, would you send me a contact?
Yes, of course. Francis, are you going to come along to the conference or just to meet up?
I might just come to the meetup. The conference might be a bit pricey.
Okay, then I'll have something. Francis, I'll have something for you there.
Okay, well, send me the notification of the meetup so I know exactly what's happening and can get my head together. Please.
Okay, I in the chat I've put the WhatsApp group. If you scroll back and click, I'm not completely sure about how everything works there. I went to scope out the hotel a few days ago. It's fabulous. When you walk out the door, you see some Big Ben and the Houses of Parliament.
Give me the name of the hotel. Just give it to me.
I'm sorry?
Give me the name of the hotel so I don't have to...
It's the Park Plaza Westminster Bridge.
Oh, right. Okay.
It's on that traffic island that used to have those silvery things there.
Yes.
The hotel design is sort of I think, inspired by 1970s porn. It's all sort of black and red and everything. Well, you'll see when you go there. It's
The
kind
time of the gathering is what?
well, we haven't actually set one yet, but I think it's going to be about 5 o'clock on the Monday after Tom's talk.
Okay.
Well,
That's
you know,
next
it's the south of the river. There's not a huge amount of places to go there, but
That's next Monday.
next
Tomorrow.
Monday,
A week tomorrow or tomorrow?
a week tomorrow.
Yes, thought so. Okay. I'll be there.
And you can always find us, if you come to the conference, you can always find us at the exhibitor table. We have 2 tables there for the full duration of the conference, and we're right next to Family Tree DNA.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just returning to what Michael was saying, if it doesn't sort of impinge on what's being said at the conference, do we have any idea of the sort of Christian population of Iberia around 1492?
Yes.
Or the global population, because there would have been a big Muslim population at that time.
Indeed, yes.
These are good questions for ChatGPT.
Oh, ChatGPT's gone down a bit now. So okay, if nobody's got an answer to that, is it? I mean, I remember some years ago there was a genetic study that was saying that that many Yemenite Jews were actually sort of converts from Arabs, and everyone was getting very upset about that. I don't know why. Is that correct or not?
Well, we have found that the Jewish community worldwide has a kernel. Okay, there's a kernel of Levantine origins.
Yes.
It may vary in size, but every community we've tested has this kernel, whether it's Bukharan or Chinese or Yemenite or Moroccans. They all have the Cohen modal haplotype. Okay, every one of them. And what distinguishes them is, think of it as a pearl, right? As a pearl surrounded by, the pearl is composed of concentric spheres. And the inner part of the pearl is the Levantine population, but in every community, there has been the introduction of men from local communities. We see this everywhere. So there's no purebred community anywhere. So there's no question that we see conversion of tribesmen to Judaism. But this happened these weren't not Muslims. This happened a long time ago. Yeah. Perhaps as much as a couple of thousand years ago. What's interesting is when we look at the DNA of certain Yemeni lineages, we find the exact opposite. We have clear indications of Yemeni Jews who converted to Islam.
Oh, right.
We're not seeing any particular. Now, I want to point out to you that every single person alive today descends from somebody who converted. Okay?
Really? Ah.
Every Jew alive today descends from somebody who converted. Or let's put it this way, embraced Judaism. Even the Torah says that Abraham was the descendant of idol worshippers. Yes?
It's true.
So it's just a question of when and where, not if.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's good framing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's so we find, my Y chromosome, became Jewish, as I mentioned earlier, in Portugal, probably in around 300 AD when they emigrated from England, of all places. So I'm coming home when I go to this conference, David. And so, but the fact is that this population merged into a larger population of Jews and has been marrying them for 1,700 years. So it's an indistinguishable population. And I would say my lineage, AB84, is so deeply ingrained in the Ashkenazi population that every one of you who is Ashkenazi descends from, or has any Ashkenazi heritage at all, descends from the same lineage that I do. It's just, it doesn't show up in you. We're just I have a slide where I show a little white square, okay? and I say, this is your Y chromosome. And then I draw back and I show that that white square is part of the eyeball in a Roman mosaic. The point being that we're all part of this mosaic, and we may carry this Y chromosome or this mitochondrial DNA, but it's just part of one of, in our case, 700 Y chromosomes that compose the population as we understand it right now.
Wonderful.
Just looking at YouTube, Alain has said there's also Abulafias, or were also Abulafias in Aleppo and Damascus. So
yeah. So as far as we have found so far, it's all one family.
Yeah. Returning to something we were touching on before, which is, I think, something perhaps we can also discuss in a future meeting. We were talking about the genetic research, the sort of general sort of genealogical research we're doing. Then there's the sort of Nação Hebraica project and such like that are also bringing much more data in, and also geographical information systems. Is there anyone around, because obviously the goal is to sort of try to pull everything together. Are you aware of anyone else for any other sort of community who has a project like that?
Well, I don't know about our specific community. I know that Family Tree DNA is working on a GIS type project right now for their results.
Yes.
Trying to tie SNPs to specific locations to be able to draw migration maps. I had a long conversation with them yesterday on this topic, in that if they are trying to draw Jewish maps, they're going to make many errors. They're going to make one fundamental error, which was that the propagation of Jewish DNA throughout Europe and North Africa has a Mediterranean route. Okay, if you try to do a typical map, it's going to show all kinds of zigging and zagging through Europe, which is not how it happened. Okay, the movement is eastward, not westward, for the most part. And so we've had a conversation with them about how can we identify the Jewish lineages specifically so that they can at least treat them differently, because they are a completely different story. I mean, clearly this was a Mediterranean population that went by boat. When we look at the Ashkenazi, among the Ashkenazi populations that are not from the Ottoman Empire, let's leave the Ottoman Empire, the latecomers separately, the founding Ashkenazi populations, those where we have found a precursor population, have one has been from Spain, but the majority of them we found have been North Africa.
Yeah.
Okay, suggesting that this was a maritime spread. Now the next question is going to be, how did they get to North Africa and Spain? I'm sure they went by boat, at least if they went to Spain. Who did they go with? So one of the things we've been curious about is, did they go with the Phoenicians? Did they go with the Romans? How was it that the Jews population propagated westward into the northern land? So this is something we're very interested in. And I think as we begin doing big Y testing of the remaining 400 lineages that we haven't big Y tested yet, some of this stuff will pop up. We'll start to get some insights into it.
Yeah.
But we have plenty of Tunisians and Libyans and Moroccans that appear to be precursors to Ashkenazi Y chromosome lineages. So there's certainly something going on there.
Thank you. Ton, you're muted. You are still muted, Ton.
We've been going on for more than an hour now. One last question before we wrap it up. What is the next big step in genetics?
Whole genome sequencing.
Mm-hmm.
I think right now, whole genome sequencing, the price has come down drastically. Yes, Pete, the Carthaginians came from the Phoenicians, exactly right. And they settled all the way through. They went through the Gibraltar all the way to the west coast of Portugal and southwest Spain. The next big step is whole genome sequencing. Right now, we're looking at maybe 7 to 10 million locations on the Y chromosome and 250,000 locations autosomally and 16,000 locations on the mitochondrial. But whole genome sequencing, we'll be looking at 3 billion locations on each genome. And I expect that there are all kinds of secrets we're going to discover as we begin to look at the whole genome. Up to now, cost has been one item, but the cost now is down to about $300 or $400. Yes, Hakon, we do have Pechloto DNA. Give me a call or email. And I think that once we start being able to parse the whole genome sequencing, I think we're going to learn a lot. One of the problems with whole genome sequencing is the data sets are enormous, 40, 50 gigabyte. So we're going to need a lot of computing power to wade through these genomes and find results. I expect that as we develop machine learning and other capacity for 24/7 crawling through data sets, we'll be able to start making some inferences from these genomes. But it's an expensive process. I don't think we're there yet. And again, we have to solve the problem of how do we do this in a way that our data is not compromised. So that's the future, whole genome sequencing.
And one last question from Hakon. He asks, did you do any Peixoto DNA?
Yes.
Okay, so he'll be in touch. Unfortunately, from his side of the family, no male Peixotos are left, but he is interested. So I'll bring him in contact with you. So, David, let's wrap it up.
Yes. So I think I've advertised this London conference to death, so let's not do that again. However, anyone who's in London who wants to come to Bevis Mark's synagogue on Wednesday night for Tisha B'Av is very welcome, and also anyone who's in London on the Friday night before the conference. And especially if you haven't booked to do the tour of Bevis Marks, just turn up at 7:15 and join the service, which is not terribly long. But if you are Shomer Shabbat, it's quite a long walk back to the conference hotel. Thank you, Adam, and we're sorry we had so many problems. We'll revisit this at some future date when we have perhaps better organization or better technology.
Well, I think what I'll do, David, is now that I know the kinds of things you're interested in, Michael and I will put together a talk and we'll do a real presentation that's thought through. How's that sound on some of these topics?
That sounds good. And Francis is ending. So, Ton, would you like to close the meeting?
Yes. Thank you to all of our patrons who are with us here on Zoom, and thank you to our viewers on YouTube, and a big thank you to Adam. Never mind all the problems, and we learned a couple of new things today. Thank you to Michael Waas, who was willing to fill in some dead spots in the presentation. And we hope to see you again in 2 weeks' time. Those who are coming to the conference, we hope to see you and meet you and shake hands.
Thank you to everyone. And by the way, anyone who knows of people who they think we should be testing in London, please let me know. And we're bringing 100 kits with us, so we've got lots of opportunities. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, and good night, everybody.